What is up, YouTube?
And welcome back to another one of our Get Better or Learning Yu-Gi-Oh! 101 videos. Today we are discussing spell and trap cards.
First off, we have normal spells. Michael, when can I activate a normal spell?
You can only activate a normal spell during the main phase, during main phase 1 or main phase 2. Next, after you decide which normal spell you want to activate, you continue on by playing it, and then we identify the cost and we pay the cost before we resolve its effect.
On the screen, you will notice that we have Pot of Desires up there. The cost of this card before the two dots is banish the top 10 cards of your deck face down.
Yes. So what this does is you banish the top 10 cards of your deck face down, then your opponent has the chance to respond to it.
Normal spells also have a few exceptions because normally they go to the grave rather than, stay face up on the field. One of the exceptions is Swords of Revealing Light. Its
Yes.
effect, Michael will read to you now.
Alright. So, alright, so Swords of Revealing Light says flip all monsters your opponent controls face up. This card remains face up for 3 of your opponent's turns. While this card is face up, monsters your opponent control cannot declare an attack.
This card also is like, I guess it's what you would call pseudo continuous spell, because if you do Mystical Space Typhoon or Twin Twister it away, you can still attack that turn. And there's a few other things that could go into detail on about this card, but those are a little more complicated things. This isn't a card you're going to see very much in play, not unless you're playing with your friends really casually.
Yeah. Next thing, speaking of continuous spells, we're going to move on to continuous spells. Our examples are Fire Formation Tenki and Zodiac Barrage.
Two powerful cards.
Indeed.
Now, Michael, when can I activate a continuous spell?
Continuous spells also can only be activated during the main phases, specifically yours. I forgot to clarify that, I think, during the last one, but yes, you can only activate a continuous spell card and a normal spell card. And just to get this out of the way for the future references, rituals, equips, and fields.
But what if I set the card on the field?
You may turn it face up immediately.
But can I do it on my opponent's turn?
No. You can only activate normal spells, continuous spells, ritual spells, equip spells, and field spells during your turn. Unless a different card that allows you to activate them states otherwise.
But what if I activate my 10 key and my opponent chains Mystical Space Typhoon or Twin Twister to it? What happens to me then, Michael?
Well, then your Fire Formation 10 key cannot resolve. So, as you see, Fire Formation 10 key says when this card is activated, you can add a level 4 Beast or lower Beast Warrior monster from your deck to your hand. You would not get that effect because it is no longer on the field, so it cannot resolve. This is not the same as negating, and that is an important thing to realize. Right. Also, with Tenki, you cannot activate Ghost Ogre to when this card is activation add a level 4 Beast Warrior, a level 4 or lower Beast Warrior, because it's not an activated effect of a spell card that has already been on the field. And Ghost Ogre specifically says that for it to destroy a spell or trap card, it has to be a spell or trap card's effect that has been activated while it was already face up. Which brings us to Zodiac Barrage, which states that you can target one monster or one face up card you control and destroy it, and if you do, special summon a Zodiac monster from your deck. So that is an activated effect after Zodiac Barrage has already been activated and just sat on the field. And so you could chain something like Ghost Ogre to it to destroy it, and it would not get its special summon ability. And this goes with the same with the Mystical Space Typhoon and the Twin Twisters that we spoke about earlier.
Zodiac Barrage is also one of those strange instances where it can target itself for its effect and destroy itself, and still special summon a monster.
Yes, because the targeting is the cost, not the destruction. So when we're identifying target, it's important to realize that it says target one face-up card you control, semicolon, destroy it, and then if you do, you special summon it. So the targeting is the cost. So if it's resolves, Zodiac Barrage doesn't need to be on the field anymore because destroying itself is irrelevant at that point because its effect had already gone off. And that's why it is one of the exceptions of it leaving the field and getting its effect, because destroying is not the cost, it is the effect of the card. Moving on.
What about field spells?
Field spells. Alright. Field spells are very similar to continuous. You can only activate them during your main phase 1 or 2. And you can only you could only use their effects during your main phase 1 and 2 if they have an activated ability, unless the card states otherwise. So we have Dragonic Diagram as our example, and in this example it states that once per turn you can destroy one other card you control or in your hand, and if you do, you add a True Draco or True King card from your deck to your hand. So in this instance, you could also chain the Ghost Ogre card we talked about earlier, and if they chain MST, or Mystical Space Typhoon or Twin Twister, something to destroy this while it's activating, because it left the field, it cannot resolve, so you do not get the search, and because the destruction effect isn't a cost, as you'll see, the once per turn has the colon, as that is the cost, you will not get the search or the destruction. Field spells are very similar to continuous spells in a lot of ways, and the only super big difference is there are cards that interact with both specifically, and where the field spell goes as opposed to the continuous, because the field spells have their own zone that they go into, whereas continuous spell and trap cards go into the normal spell and trap card zones.
Alright, moving right along.
This brings us to ritual spells. For our ritual spells, we have two examples because they're both really good examples of the different types of ritual spells out there. Because Revendread Origin states it can be used for any Revendread ritual monster from your hand or graveyard. You must tribute monsters from your hand or field and or banish zombies from your graveyard whose level is equal to or exceeds the level of the ritual monster that you're trying to summon with it. So the important part is that with this card, you can over-tribute your monsters. The Revendread Ritual Monster, the one that is currently out to this day, is a level 6. And you are allowed to tribute a level 7 and a level 3, which would equal 7 if you were to use this card. However, if you use our next example, Contract with the Abyss.
7 and 3? That makes 10.
Yeah, that works too. I was
That
thinking
no,
I got ahead of myself because I said I was thinking of 4 and 3 makes 7, and then I got 7 and 3. Yeah. Anyway,
4 and 3 is
uh,
what he means, because
yes.
you can't you can't like over exceed it by say you can't like tribute a 3 and then tribute the 7. I think you'd have to tribute the 7 for all of it because you can't actually overpay. You can accidentally by adding two numbers that aren't like the exact same as it or more. You can overpay, but you can't like purposely overpay dramatically for a ritual even if it says you can.
Yeah. That was my bad for misspeaking. Anyway, contract with the Abyss states that it has to be the exact level. So, in order to summon the Vendread monster we talked about earlier, you'd have to use monsters whose total level equals 6. You could not exceed it by any means whatsoever. Most ritual spells are one or the other. Either, if they do not specify exact, then you can usually go over by adding two together or using one monster that has just a higher level. However, there are some like this one who say it has to be exact, which we're gonna move right along since rituals are pretty simple and I think we got most of it done. You can only activate these during your main phases once again. And the same goes for our next topic, equip spells. Equip spells can only be activated during your main phases. Now, our example is Moonmere Shield. We just used that as an example because it was our favorite equip spell. Equip spells usually have a benefit in which they summon a monster or they make your monster's attack go higher. Most of the time, a lot of equip spells aren't ran, and that's because they have the same downside as the continuous spells and the field spells, in which if you were to mystical space typhoon them and they had an effect like say Moonmere Shield, they declare the attack hoping Moonmere Shield's not the best example when I really think about it, but if you had something like an old card like Premature Burial, okay, we don't have that on here, but Premature Burial states it's an equip spell. You pay 800 life points, target a monster in your graveyard, and then you special summon it in a face-up attack position. Now, if they were to Mystical Space Typhoon after you paid the 800 life points and targeted your monster, you would not get that effect. Moonmere Shield, it would not be able. It would just go to the graveyard and just then you'd have to pay its cost to pay the 500 and place it on top or bottom for Moonmere Shield. So yeah, equip spells are the same as continuous and field spells, where if they have an effect and the opponent uses Mystical Space Typhoon or Twin Twister, you don't get the effect. They're just gone.
Yeah. Actually, you covered those pretty well. I do not have any more silly questions for him because you managed to answer all of them.
We'll move right along, and we're gonna be. And the next card is an example of a card we've been talking a lot about in this video, which is Twin Twister, which is a quick play spell. Now, Stefan, quick play spells are a little bit different than the rest of the spells, correct?
You mean I can't activate them the turn that I set them?
No. You cannot activate a quick play spell the turn that you set them. They're also something called a spell speed 2. Normal spell cards, all the ones we discussed so far, are something called spell speed 1, which means they can start a chain, but they cannot respond in a chain. A spell speed 2 can respond to anything that's a spell speed 1 or also a spell speed 2. It cannot respond to a spell speed 3, but we'll talk about spell speed 3s once we get to the trap cards.
But Michael, I
Quick
have another
plays,
question for you. If on my
yeah.
battle phase I attack into your monster with Moonmere Shield on it, Can I activate my Twin Twisters during the battle phase from my hand on my
You
turn?
can. You can, as long as it is your turn. If it is your opponent's turn, you cannot activate the quick play from your hand. But you
Unless another
are,
card lets you do that.
yes. But you are allowed to do that, Stefan. In which case, my Moon Meteor Shield would die, and probably my monster would. Okay, I think that about covers the quick play spells, because I discussed spell speed 2 and how you could only be chained to a spell speed 1 or another spell speed 2. So we're going to move right along to the trap cards. Next, the first trap card we're going to talk about are something called chainable trap cards. And chainable trap cards can be activated anytime you have priority. Now, we'll talk about priority in another video, but the essential is anytime your opponent does something, you get to respond. That could be anything like moving phases or something like that, and you can activate this compulsory activation device that we have for an example.
Compulsory evac, you mean, right?
Yes.
That name does sound cooler, though.
Also, you must set a trap. In order to activate a trap card, you have to set it first. You cannot just activate a trap card to activate the trap card from your hand. You have to place it face down on the field in your spell and trap card zone and wait till at least it's your opponent's turn before you can activate them. There are two different types of trap cards usually. One, like compulsory evacuation device. I keep saying activation. Evacuation device, where you can chain it to anytime your opponent, right after any time your opponent does like almost anything. And then there's something like Mirror Force, when it's only can be activated in certain situations. Almost all trap cards fall under the category of spell speed 2, except for the counter trap, and we will talk about that when we come to it. But right now, we're going to focus on the other traps. So Mirror Force is an example of a card that you can only activate if your opponent declares an attack, whereas compulsory allows you to activate it anytime your opponent does almost anything.
All right.
Also, if you Mystical Space Typhoon or Twin Twister a compulsory evacuation device, the compulsory will still go off. Twin Twister and Mystical Space Typhoon do not negate. They cannot stop a normal spell card or normal trap cards unless it's specifically something like Swords of Revealing Light that decides to stay on the field. Otherwise, they still get their effect and you use the card for no real reason. Moving on, we're going to talk about continuous traps.
How do continuous traps work, Michael? Are they anything like continuous spell cards, or are they different?
Continuous trap cards are more similar to regular trap cards, where you have to set them first and wait till at least till your opponent's turn. Then you're allowed to activate them. And when you activate them, they stay on the field. They don't go away just because you activated them. However, they are similar to continuous spell cards, Stefan, in the sense that if you Twin Twister them or Mystical Space Typhoon them, they go away and they do not get their effects. We have two examples of a card that is similar to Tenki in the sense that right when it's activated, your opponent has to respawn to it and cannot Ghost Ogre it, and a card that's similar to Barrage, where your opponent can use Ghost Ogre to your effect. Now, Call the Haunted. We forgot to kind of mention this, so I'm going to briefly cover it in continuous Trap cards also have costs. And for Call the Haunted and Compulsory, their costs are targeting. So with Call the Haunted, you target a monster in your graveyard. That is the cost. Then your opponent has a chance to respond to it by using their Twin Twister. English is hard. Their Twin Twister or their Mystical Space Typhoon and destroying it. And if they do that, you don't get your card. But they can't use Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit because it's not activating its effect while already being face up. Unlike Unending Nightmare. Unending Nightmare states, pay 1,000 life points, then target one face-up spell/trap card on the field and destroy it. And you can only activate Unending Nightmare once per chain. The cost of this card is the paying of the life points and the targeting.
Michael, I have a question for you. Can I target my own Unending Nightmare with itself?
Yes, you may.
But Michael, what if I activate my Unending Nightmare and my opponent Ghost Ogres it? Do I still have to pay the 1,000 life points?
Yes, you do. Because paying the cost happens before everything else. So you'll pay when you activate it and you use its effect. You have to pay the 1,000 life points and declare your target. If your opponent Ghost Ogres it, well, you lose a card and you still lose the life points.
Well, that doesn't seem very fair for a card.
Happens. It's to keep the game more balanced. Because if you had to rewind every time you did that, something like that, the game would drag out a lot longer than sometimes it does when your opponent's playing trap cards that try to slow you down. So I believe they did that for more convenience purposes. The next thing we're going to talk about are counter traps. Counter traps are in a world all their own. They're in something called the Spell Speed 3. Spell Speed 3s can be activated to other Spell Speed 3s, Spell Speed 2s, and Spell Speed 1s. Spell Speed counter traps are almost always reactionary things, though. I don't believe that there is a counter trap out there that you can activate at any given time. If there is, then I just don't know about it. But most counter traps are, like the name suggests, to counter something.
Oh, but once again, what if I were to Dark Bribe my opponent's Solemn Warning? Do they still pay the 2,000 life points?
Yes, because our example of Solemn Warning, the paying 2,000 is a cost.
But Michael, what if I Dark Bribe my opponent's Dark Bribe? Do we both draw a card?
No, the last Dark Bribe draws the card, because the last Dark Bribe is the only one that resolves, and drawing a card, having your opponent draw a card is not the cost.
Oh, okay.
Also, it's important to realize Solemn Warning and Solemn Strike's differences. I guess we should have put Solemn Strike in here as an example, but
On screen.
Solemn Warning says when a monster or monsters would be summoned, or when a spell/trap or monster effect is activated that includes the special summon of a monster or monsters, you pay 2,000, negate the activation, or negate the summon or the activation, and if you do destroy that. Strike is worded so it can only hit monster effects or inherent summons, which we covered in our summoning video. If you have a question on what inherent summoning is, you can go check out that video. It'll be in the same playlist as this, and we'll leave a link in the description box down below on this video.
Michael, I have a question. This happened to me at my locals once, and I think my opponent might have cheated me out of a game. I activated Macrocosmos, and he Solemn Warninged it. Is he allowed to do that?
Well, let's look at Macrocosmos. Macrocosmos says, when this card resolves, you can special summon Helios, the Primordial Sun, from your hand or deck. While this card is face up on the field, any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. So because Macrocosmos states that you can special summon a Helios, the Primordial Sun, from your hand or deck, you can chain Solemn Warning to that, pay the 2,000, and then Macrocosmos will be negated and destroyed and sent to the graveyard because it never resolved.
But
So,
Michael, I didn't even have Helios the Primordial Sun in my deck. How is that even fair?
because you still attempt to special summon it, and because the special summoning is optional, and you don't have to activate, you don't have to special summon it, it still has the effect to special summon. So it's one of those things that it attempts to try to special summon it, regardless whether you have it in your deck or not.
Oh, okay, I guess that makes sense a little bit.
Yes. I believe that about covers it for spells and traps. We covered spell speeds. We've covered what continuous spells and continuous trap cards.
But Michael Senpai, I have another card that was activated on me back a long time ago, and I would like you to talk about it. This card is called Super Poly. What spell speed is that card, and why can't I activate things in response to it?
Okay. So, technically, Super Polymerization, which is a quick play spell, is technically a spell speed 2. However, it has an ability that says cards and effects cannot be activated in response to this card's activation. So a lot of people refer to this as the spell speed 4, where nothing can be activated and it just happens and there's nothing you can do about it, and it's not really a fun mechanic to play versus.
But Michael, it got negated once. My opponent was playing a Fabled deck. How did that work? Their stupid unicorn thing stopped it.
That is a continuous effect. Continuous effects continuously happen, and there is no way to stop them besides trying to negate them with another card. But if their continuous effects negate cards that would stop their effects, then they have full priority. So Unicorn, when you discard the card, when your opponent had Fabled Unicorn, and you discarded the card for Super Poly to activate it and made your hand size the same, Super Poly could no longer be activated, and its effects are or it could no longer be. It got negated because Unicorn doesn't activate, because it says effects cannot be activated in response. So Unicorn does not activate to negate. So your Super Poly just got negated because Unicorn's effect doesn't activate.
Oh, I guess that makes somewhat of a sense.
Do you have any other questions for me today, Stefan?
No, I think you've answered just about every one of them.
Well, that was our video on spells and trap cards. If you have any questions, we'll
leave a comment
down below. We'll go ahead and comment down below, and we'll try to answer them. If you want to check out our summoning video, we'll put a link in the description, as we did make a reference to it. Until next time, YouTube. And remember to beware the wrath of Susan.
Yes, beware.